Hello YouTube, I'm Toby, and today's video is all about the GT440. This right here is the NVIDIA GeForce GT440. The exact manufacturer of this particular card, I never really figured out who was. There are a variety of the GT440s out there. I tried to track down the manufacturer of this one, but all I found was a Polish website. So my educated guess would be that this is a low-end version of the GT440, since the core clock is not as high as the actual GT440 specified on NVIDIA's website. But what I can tell you about this particular one is that it has 1.5 gigabytes of DDR3 VRAM. It's got 3 interfaces, a DVI, an HDMI and a DisplayPort output, and it is a single slot card. And as you can probably tell, it's got a huge heatsink on it, and a quite small fan. Before we get into the benchmarks of this particular card, I first thought we might talk about the system. Now, besides the GT440, in the system there's an i3 2100 dual-core processor clocked at 3.1 GHz. Furthermore, we have 8 GB of DDR3 RAM clocked at 1333 MHz. For our power supply, we have an MS Tech power supply. I can't really remember the exact wattage, but it is more than plenty for this card. Alright, so now that we have the system out of the way and the specifications for the card, let's jump into the first benchmark. The first benchmark we're going to be running is Furmark preset 720p. Now, the Furmark benchmark went way better than I had expected, and we ended with a score of 771 points. I then jumped straight to the Resident Evil 6 benchmarking tool, which gave us a score of 3,492. Now, once again, this score was way beyond what I had expected for this card. For our first game, I tried Counter-Strike Global Offensive at a mix of, mostly low but also a few medium settings. The game ran very smooth, and I was actually able to enjoy the gameplay. Our FPS counter was, I wouldn't say stable, but it was lying between 100 and 200 frames per second, which is more than enough to play this particular game. Now, since this card had performed so well in the Resident Evil 6 benchmarking tool, I figured I want to give the PUBG a try. Now, I set all these settings to, pretty much as low as they would go, and I quickly went ahead. Now, first up in the airplane, it seemed promising. I was getting somewhere between 20 and 30 frames per second. However, once I got out of the plane, this quickly changed, and once we actually touched the ground, we had fallen to somewhere around 15 to 18 frames per second. Now, this is pretty much unplayable, but I figured I'd want to go ahead anyway. I got a pretty decent view of the scenery around this particular house when I was trying to hunt down some guy and punch him to death. It did take a while before I got around to him. He was pretty much just running in circles, but eventually I managed to find him, and I pretty much killed him with 17 frames per second, which gotta really hurt for him. Now, I decided to go ahead and finish the game. Well, I did not get chicken dinner, but I did find a car that I drove around for a while until someone finally managed to kill me. I was kind of disappointed with the low frame rate in PUBG, but I guess I should have seen it coming basically. But we still have a chance to overclock this card. The maximum temperature during all of these tests were a mere 64 degrees Celsius, so we should have plenty of headroom. Now, after a while, I think I may have given this a fairly decent overclock. I think it could have gone higher, but the temperature during the benchmarking had gone up to 75 degrees Celsius, which is, I like to keep my cards below 80, so this was the maximum for me. So, of course, I went ahead and tried the PUBG again at the same settings as before, and it really didn't do as much of a difference as I had hoped it would. However, the frame rate was a little bit higher. It was in the low 20s. It's still not entirely playable, but, I guess you could in a pinch. Now, right here I had landed in a church, and I'm pretty much just trying to kill some guy with a Glock. Now, actually, this guy got away from me a couple times, but eventually I managed to hunt him down and kill him. Alright YouTube, so that was my video on the GT440. Now, I really didn't expect this card to perform as well as it did. it actually outperformed the GT730 that I own by a fairly significant margin actually, and I don't know, I just didn't really expect that. Now if you don't know anything about this particular model of GT440, I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say, because I really couldn't find anything, anything useful on it, so a little intel would be nice. But what did we learn about this? Well, the GT440 is a pretty great Counter-Strike Global Offensive graphics card. So if that's what you want to play, I guess you might actually be able to find this one quite cheaply. I got mine in a bundle of hardware, so it's difficult to pinpoint the exact price of it. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you very much for watching.